here today. It's my great honor and privilege to speak to you about some of the work I'm doing with Fairtrade, and I thought I would end my very brief comments with a few things that have driven me in my work over the years, or at least helped me. So I thought I'd start with sort of a little bit on Fairtrade about why we actually need something like Fairtrade. And it's important to understand that 70% of the world's food is actually produced by 500 million smallholders around the world. 70% of our food is produced by some of the people that are the poorest in the world, and actually 50% of this group that produces this food is amongst the most hungry in the world, which seems ironic and insane. The US Department of Labor has estimated over 20 million people are in slave labor globally. An ILO study in 1996 found 168 million children are forced to work in fashion, and 12 million children in manufacturing. And just recently a study came out saying 7,000 5 to 14-year-olds are actually stitching balls in Pakistan 11 hours a day. And guess what they get? About 60 cents. It's extraordinary. And actually Aussie rules and our very own Aussie rules and our very own, what's that other one? That other league? Rugby league. Were caught with balls from these very institutions. So we have to change that. This is basically the way the world's economy is designed. I could put this up for cocoa or coffee or cotton or any commodity. This happens to be cocoa. 90% of the world's cocoa is grown by these tiny, tiny farmers. There are only 8 companies that control the supply of that cocoa, and of course it sells to billions of us. I don't know if anybody doesn't eat chocolate, but I certainly eat chocolate. And the cocoa farmers receive about 3.5% of each chocolate bar. So we've got to fix that. We've got to break that. And 25 years ago, it was only 25 years ago, within my lifetime, I mean half of my lifetime, I was actually a grown person when they started Fairtrade. And the thought was really that we could organize and help farmers to build economic and political skills that would change the way the global trading system was conducted. And it succeeded wildly. So it started in 1988. By 97, they had really convened around a global mark. The market growth was incredible. And I had the great privilege, as you would have seen, to chair the international board. And during my time as the chair of the board, we actually changed the whole of the constitution of Fairtrade to make it half owned by the producers that we serve, the producers and workers that we serve. So you talk about organizations where there's charity and there's all kinds of empowerment. This is sort of way beyond that. We're talking about half ownership, so they represent half of the General Assembly, all the decisions are made by that General Assembly, and they represent half of the board, and all of the critical policy decisions are made by the board. So I guess we'd have to say that we're changing quite dramatically. And if you look at the market, it's also gone from being sort of a niche market to being quite a mainstream market. 42% of bananas in Switzerland, 50% of sugar in the UK are all Fairtrade products. So that 50% ownership is something that, for me, is one of the greatest things I've ever had the privilege to be part of. So they have a really clear vision, a world in which all producers can enjoy and secure sustainable livelihoods and fulfill their potential and decide on their own futures. To connect disadvantaged producers and consumers and promote fairer trading conditions, empowering producers to combat poverty, strengthen their position, and take more control again over their lives. So this is what the worldwide network looks like, and these figures change so fast that it's now actually over 5 billion euros every year. That's about 7 billion Australian dollars in Fairtrade products are traded around the world every year. About 85 now million euros in premium, and I'll explain that in a second, actually go into these poor communities to spend on poverty alleviation projects. Products are sold in about 125 countries. About 1.6 million farmers and in about 75 countries are working with Fairtrade. And the way Fairtrade's organized is quite simply, there's producer networks in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and there are countries that are consumer countries in all the places you'd expect. But the really interesting thing is, we're now reaching the point where we're starting to get south-south trades in India, in places like South Africa and Africa, and so we're trying in this region in Asia to expand that south-to-south trade much more expansively. And of course, it's the most recognized label in the world. This is only in 25 years. You imagine what you'll be able to do in the next 25 years. It's quite extraordinary. 9 out of 10 people who know it trust it. And it is widely recognized right around the world. There are fair trade initiatives of all kinds. And I would say support every single one of them. It's really, really important to support fair trade. The unique thing about the way we do fair trade is we have a minimum price, and that's because the commodities that we're dealing with in fair trade are just going up and down like that every day. And so the minimum price actually protects the farmer. It's kind of insurance on a day-to-day basis. And then there's a premium on top of the traded commodities. So a group like Rainforest or UTZ would trade a commodity, but they wouldn't have the minimum price and the premium. The premium is actually what I think of as the dividend of the poverty alleviation dividend. And that's what enables the community to decide how they're going to invest in potable water, in education, in increasing their quality in a hospital, whatever it is. And that's unique about fair trade. And this just shows that the growth of fair trade has been consistent. But actually, you know what? Even with 37% growth in something like our global retail sales, we're still talking about 1% of the world's coffee. So we have a long way to go. We have a long, long way to go. These are great growth rates, but actually we have to do it much, much more comprehensive and much more effectively in terms of changing the global trade. Now there is a little opportunity here. We have the G20 coming to Australia in Brisbane in November. And any of you guys that want to sort of push their buttons, that's really a good place. There's 20 world leaders there, and they should all be listening to you. The other thing that I would just say about fair trade before wrapping that is that it's really working hard. What we do is very hard. Trying to change global trade is very hard. Trying to help producers to enter a global trade in a competitive way is very, very difficult. And we're constantly finding more challenges. You know, we have found child labor in cocoa plantations, and we've had to suspend farmers until they could get the children back in school. We find that we can empower women in places where they can't vote, they can't own land, they can't inherit anything, but if they're in a cooperative for fair trade, they actually get equal relationships with men. And actually, it's amazing how that can be transformative for a community. So empowering women is quite an important thing. We're looking at ways all the time that we can deepen and strengthen the empowerment of these producers. Hired labor standards is one of the other really, really important things that we've done recently. We're the only fair trade standard in the world that has hired labor. So workers as well. And finally, of course, engaging the market. So where we succeed the best is where we can engage the market to care about these things and to look for and to buy products that are fair trade, because of course that's where we're actually supporting the producers. So really the way we like to think about it is the power of you to change the world and make a difference in the world. So I guess the last thing I wanted to just mention is I've had a great privilege to do all kinds of very important activist things. I've run campaigns on the Rainbow Warrior. I threw this one up here because it's a fun picture of me when I was not that much older than you. I've worked at the White House. And there were just a few things that were important to me in my journey as I was trying to let my life speak, to have a voice and to have some impact on the world. And these were things like follow your bliss. You know, if there's something that really inspires you, follow it. For me, it was the environment. It was biodiversity. It was the Great Barrier Reef, which is what brought me to Australia. Following your bliss is actually going to help you be effective. Do what matters. You know, either we're part of the solution or we're part of the problem. And if you're conscious of that, and every day you're just trying to do what matters, then lots of things happen. You do all kinds of good things, and accidentally you end up in places like the White House or on the Rainbow Warrior. But also, you can sleep at night, because there's all these things you could worry about. But if you know you're doing what matters when you can, then actually you can make a huge difference. Keep an open mind. You know, sometimes we think that we have all the answers, and I've always been surprised at how often somebody that I never expected I would have anything to learn from or listen to can help me with a new insight. So always keeping an open mind. Remembering that everything is connected to everything else. And so again, if we're not part of the solution, we're part of the problem. These things are hard, and as I used to have to say on the board of Fairtrade International, where we had banana farmers and Oxford professors, and never could they agree on anything, You know, we have to be able to keep our sense of humor and understand that what we do is hard, we're not always going to agree on everything, and keeping your sense of humor helps you when things get really, really hard. In fact, once when I was at the White House, somebody posted a sign on my door that said, "Ancient Chinese proverb, man who says it cannot be done should not interrupt woman who is doing it." And I kept that on my door, and every day that was a bit of inspiration for me. You need to be willing to take risks, and that's actually why I put this picture up here. I was not somebody who would willingly jump into a dinghy and, you know, face an oil rig or an oil ship. And yet you have to be willing to get outside your comfort zone and take some risks. Being informed by your own values is important. For me, it was Quaker values. And understanding those values and how they inform the way you look at the world and the way you engage in the world is so important to your effectiveness and your ability to really contribute to the world. And finally, systems thinking is an important thing. That's a whole other conversation, which I'm sure you'll be able to have. Helping anyone you can. You never know when you can really help someone, and never giving up. Those are the things that I've taken out of my experience. And I'll finally leave you with a quote from a very dear friend of mine. She was one of the authors of The Limits to Growth, a book that has had such a profound impact on the world. And she said, "It seems to me a powerful message worth repeating and repeating, that people want peace, simplicity, beauty, nature, respect, the ability to communicate, contribute, and create. These things are much cheaper and easier to achieve than war, or luxury, or ugliness, or waste, hate, oppression, or manipulation. Someday, when everyone understands that nearly all of us want the same kind of world, it will take surprisingly little time for it to happen." So with that, I'll thank you very much.